Okay, guys, I got the record button on, so we'll go ahead and get started on our last chapter of this section. When we're dealing with our messages, we are going to look at how to appropriately deliver a bad news message today. And that means Thursday is your test on this group of chapters. So those of you in Keysville and in Emporia, if you all could just come in and take your test with some place that has a computer available to you. That'll be fine. Daniel, people, y'all come in here on your regular time and we'll take the test then. Okay, if you are an online student watching this video, I have sent out instructions about the proctored test for you. So Thursday will only be testing day. Okay, that's all we'll be doing. So hopefully you'll have time to do a little celebrating between today and Thursday for our independence. Remember, the college is closed tomorrow, so normally if you need to get in to do anything or whatever, I will probably not respond to emails tomorrow either because I have a lot of family activities going on. And today's my birthday.
Happy birthday!
So I have to continue my celebrations on from tonight into tomorrow, so probably will be ignoring the computer a little bit for a little while there. So you do have to get prepared for the test on Thursday. You can use your book and your notes, but you won't be able to go out of the computer site, the website, go to any other site. So any kind of PowerPoint slides or anything like that you want to have available for reference or whatever, you should bring those with you, print them out and bring them with you. But they are primarily highlights from the chapter, so if you have your book, you should be able to find just about everything there. You also have do the second of your writing assignments for your messages. The one for the credit union cruise, I believe, is what that one is. So that's due Sunday, so don't forget to get that in to me, and hopefully this week I will get the first ones graded, so you'll have some grades for those to show up in your grade book there. So let's go ahead and I'll come back and talk about the test a little bit after we're done today, but I'm going to go ahead and take a look at our video. Let's see.
Do you want to turn that on?
That's not what I need. We are on week 7, so it's going to be over before we know it.
That's a lot. Definitely.
All right, I hope Dr. Carden is up there for you.
I'm Pete Carden, the author of your textbook. Today I'll talk about why delivering bad news well matters, and also we've got a challenge for you. No one likes to give bad news, but in business it happens often. This chapter is about delivering bad news well. Giving bad news is an inevitable part of business. We're often in situations where you turn down the products or services of suppliers and other partners. You may be rejecting the ideas of colleagues or denying the requests of customers. Some of the most difficult times to give bad news involve giving negative performance reviews, denying promotions, or even laying people off. None of this is easy, but you can do it in a way that is best for bad news recipients and you. The AIM planning process will help you substantially. It starts most importantly with your audience. As you think carefully about the needs, both immediate and future needs of your audience, you'll find ways to deliver the news appropriately and in a way that shows your concern for them over the long run. As you analyze the nature of the bad news, you'll also think of ways to present it well and constructively. One of the major choices is whether to deliver the news in writing or in person. Typically, the more serious the bad news, the more likely you should do it in person, even though that is often more uncomfortable for you. Finally, you'll think about how to structure the bad news. Bad news often deals in psychological blow to all involved, and you'd like to figure out ways to soften that blow. So here's my challenge for you. Take care of bad news immediately. Almost without exception, bad news gets worse when you procrastinate dealing with or delivering it. In fact, when bad news is not delivered in a timely manner, others are often hurt more so by when the bad news was delivered than by the bad news itself. Furthermore, putting off delivering bad news can harm your company immensely. So build the courage to take care of bad news right away. And you'll find that you will increasingly be able to manage bad news well with a genuine concern for others. And you'll find that others view you more credibly, and in fact will increase their commitment to you.
Okay, so we've got one of the least liked types of communication we're going to have to do, and that is to deliver bad news to someone. So we are going to take a look at the best ways to do this. Notice that your homework assignment is to do something that's a bad news message written, but before you do get into this chapter, realize that your bad news messages are not always in writing. More often, if they're severe, then they need to be face-to-face. We've all heard these horrible stories about somebody who found out they lost their job through an email or something like that, and messages like that need to be handled face-to-face. So we're going to start off by looking at a video of a bad news message that's handled very wrong. And I want you to keep this in mind as we go through the right way to handle bad news. So this is a little setup of a story where an employee is finding out that their company is restructuring, and he doesn't know whether he's going to have a job or not. So let me get that going. Remember, this is not the right way to do it. Let's see.
You wanted to see me.
Hi, Karen, how's it? Well, you know the company is going through some big changes at the moment.
Yeah, no one said for definite what's happening with marketing, but it's been some rumours.
Well, big news is we're going to be completely restructuring the department. We're going to have a total meeting.
So what does that mean for me?
Well, basically, everything's up for grabs, which is great. We're going to make sure that
I'm sorry,
skills.
what do you mean everything's up for grabs? Some jobs going. What's happening?
Yeah, well, some positions are going to have to go. There'll be a couple of new roles as well.
Is my job being cut?
I don't know, Simon. We'll just have to wait and see.
When are you going to know?
Well, that's what we're thinking this week.
Okay, if my job isn't being cut, what then?
Well, you'll have to reapply for it. We're sending out a list of all the positions and getting everyone to apply by the end of the
I have to reapply for my own job, even though I just joined 6 months ago.
This isn't easy for us either, Louise.
Oh, yeah, sure. Have you got to apply for your job?
That's not the point.
No, we just moved into the flat, don't you? And now you're telling me I could be out of a job.
What do you want me to say, Simon? It's nothing personal.
And if I don't get my old job back, what then? Is there somewhere else I can move in the company?
No idea.
And how are you selecting these people? Was it last in, first out, that sort of thing?
I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do.
Well, you should know.
You know, don't shoot the messenger, okay? I'm just telling
You
you.
can't do this out of the blue. There's been no consultation, no nothing.
I don't need to consult you about any of this. It's basic restructuring. It happens all the
Basic
time.
restructuring. I can't believe this. I could be out of a job and you're calling it basic restructuring.
Look, if you want to reference us in the future, then I'm really going to make a fuss, okay? Just apply for the job.
Okay, I see. It looks like you've already decided that now.
There's no decision being made until everyone's applied. Calm down.
You know, I turned down another job offer to come to work. What about all this, oh, we're a growing company, rubbish? You must have known then that this was on the cards. You know what, I think this is just box ticking. You want to get rid of people, but you're covering up with this whole reapply for your own job thing. Just tell me now, am I in or am I out?
I'm not in a position to do that, Simon. You've got to.
She calls a meeting to talk about redundancies for the company in front of the whole staff room. There's restless staff in there. It's, I mean, what was going through her head?
The staff room, it was more like an afterthought for me. And I knew I had to be in the back of my brain. I had to be told by higher up that I had to tell them about the situation. And I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to take my lunch break. I'm just going to say, this is what I'm going to come out and say. So I did, and then that's when it all kind of kicked on.
So everything about the environment really was wrong, really, and in that conversation we get off to a good start. So it must have felt very impersonal for Simon, who's being told bad news. It's likely that he's going to be put up for redundancy. He may lose his job. He's thinking about his family. He's got all of these things being told to him, and he's not in an environment where he can really take it.
It was very awkward, and he asked some really difficult questions, which I felt like I couldn't answer. He put me on the spot in front of my staff.
As we would all be if we were in a similar situation to Simon. He's got questions. Am I going to lose my job? What's that going to mean? What's the process? When will I know more? And we can't provide any answers to any of these questions. So that's a pretty poor performance, and certainly not one that I would like to be on the end of.
Basically, everything's up for grabs, which is great. We're going to make sure we've got
I'm
the
sorry,
best skills.
what do you mean everything's up for grabs? Some jobs going. What's happening?
So what makes it partly worse is her comment that everything is up for grabs. But that's not really the kind of comment that would be helpful in this conversation. What we should have is specific responses to specific questions. So it might be that she has to go and talk to HR, for example, before having a conversation with Simon or other colleagues to say, this type of question might come up, what should I respond?
I could be out of a job and you're calling it basic restructuring.
Look, if you want to reference us in the future, then I'm really going to make a fuss, okay? Just apply for the job.
We also see that as the conversation continues, she starts to get a little defensive, perhaps realising that she should have prepared more for the conversation. And part of her defence mechanism that we see is where she almost uses a veiled threat about the reference. So unless you play ball, there might be a suicidal reference, which is really quite inappropriate.
Yeah, should have got a positive spin on it all. I mean, how can you got a positive spin on redundancy? I mean, you know, she should have been completely frank with me and just gone, look, I'm really sorry, and I'm not buying this whole, it's not last in, first out. You know, this is what companies do. I'm not stupid. I wasn't born yesterday.
A further learning point we see from this clip is the danger of trying to take spin on news that's really bad news. People will know if it's bad news, so trying to dress it up, trying to put some icing or some topping on the message is unlikely to do him any favours. it's far better to give the news as adult. This is very much an adult-to-adult conversation, and the person on the receiving end will want to be treated as an adult. It's quite likely to become offended if a very adult message is put across in a way to try and sweeten.
Okay, so here's a situation where we have a very bad example of how to handle breaking bad news. Stop that share and get me back on here. So right off the bat, we should have recognized that there were some problems with that conversation. First of all, the environment that it was being held in. It was in the break room. Mm-hmm. Not a good place for a conversation like this. And there were other people present. Mm-hmm. You don't discuss personnel possibly losing a job or whatever in front of other employees. And you could tell the other employee was getting uncomfortable too and finally just got up and left. There is often a tendency to try to sugarcoat things, to try to make them appear as if they're good, but they're actually very bad news. So we're going to look at some ways that we avoid doing that, because that makes us not credible, but we still come straight to the point when it comes to the actual delivery of the bad news. So remember, as we're going through this, that we're the people delivering the bad news, not the ones receiving it. Although you want to think about the person who's receiving it, your audience as well. But remember, you're the manager now, so you're on the position of the person who has to deliver that news. All right, so I'm going to go to our PowerPoints. We will take a look at our, let's see here, I need to check and see if that one is going to work for us here. Everybody got that PowerPoint up there okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. We're getting better all the time here. All right. So we're going to always bring this back to whether what we're doing affects our credibility or not. We'll look at the different channels. Do we use a written message? Do we face-to-face? Do we email? And so on. We'll take principles for effectively delivering the bad news messages. We will show some examples of good and bad news messages. We will talk a little bit about performance reviews, which are sometimes, as a supervisor, you may have to deliver a negative performance review, and then we'll lastly finish up with a look at that FAIR system to review our bad news messages. Okay, so to maintain credibility when you are delivering bad news, you must be honest and open. You know people don't like to get bad news, but they do expect you to tell them the truth. So you need to be honest, you need to be open, and that will have the audience more trustful for you as the bad news bearer. Okay, so a lot of people think that just delivering bad news will shake up a relationship with your customer or make them mistrust you. If you do it the right way, it's not going to make it not bad news. It's still going to be bad news, but it can actually strengthen your customer relationships and increase the trust. Okay? So don't look at it as a chance to actually build trust, but you can use it as a tool to enhance your credibility. So here's our guidelines, things that we're going to do, things that your author mentioned in the very beginning there. You want to be timely about delivering bad news. The longer and longer you wait, the worse it's going to become. Again, we want to choose the right channel, whether we are going to do it on face-to-face meeting, by messaging, by email, whatever. Sympathize. Sympathize with the bad news recipient and soften the blow. Make sure you give the rationale behind what's happening. Explain the immediate impact of the news, and then focus on solutions and long-term benefits. And finally, always show goodwill, which means you are focusing on the other person rather than on yourself. Very stressful situations, a lot of anxiety, a lot of emotions, both for the person who's delivering the bad news and especially for the person who is receiving it. So you really will probably have to focus a lot on your message when you are delivering bad news. You want to spend extra time there. Bad news is best to be delivered in person. But of course, that's impossible in many, many situations. We'll look at some examples where customers might be receiving bad news about maybe credit or about your product replacement policy or something like that. And you cannot meet directly with those people. But if you can, face-to-face is the best method to communicate bad news, where the audience can see both verbally and non-verbally what your concern and sensitivity is in the situation. However, being able to put bad news in writing makes it so you're able to control your message more carefully. You can write it all out, go back and review it, make sure you are structuring it correctly, make sure it's precise and accurate. So sometimes you may have a situation where you find that putting the news in writing is the best method. So when you're trying to decide whether to do face-to-face or deliver in writing, you want to consider the severity of the bad news, how serious it is. You want to look at the controllability, that's the degree to which the bad news message receiver can alter the outcome. And you want to look at the likelihood, which is the probability of that bad event actually occurring. So this little table 11.1 gives you some advantages and disadvantages of verbal delivery, and then on the next slide we'll look at the same thing, advantages and disadvantages of written delivery. Clearly the verbal delivery allows the receiver to get nonverbal cues as well as verbal. It's easier for intentions to be demonstrated. An opportunity is there to clarify and explain a little better, and you can respond to any concerns immediately. Okay, on the downside, your emotions can come through when you're doing a verbal delivery. It does take more time. You're not able to document the bad news as well, and you are less able to provide directions that the recipient can go back and look at later. Okay, now the written delivery, on the other hand, you got that time to craft a message, you can document it easier, you can have it there for a reference for future action, and you can deliver the message to more people at one time. But you can't show those nonverbal cues. You can't get responses from your audience immediately. You're not able to collaborate on solutions, possible solutions, and it's less able to control the long-term impacts on your relationships. So you're really going to have to weigh those advantages and disadvantages in choosing which channel to use in communicating bad news. Okay, so here are some examples and their suggestions for what type of channel would best be used to deliver this information. If it's something that is low in severity and high controllability, such as someone you're working with, their idea is being rejected. And it looks like you could use just about any of those methods. That little asterisk says it depends on the communication channel used or preferred by the bad news recipient. So written, verbal, not in person, verbal, and nonverbal, not in person, like a video call. Verbal and nonverbal in person, like a meeting, and then in person plus writing. That would be like a meeting with a follow-up memo. Customer claim it's rejected. That's the same type of thing. It's a low severity, but low controllability. And then we move on in severity, medium severity. We suggest the verbal, not in person, like a vendor chooses another supplier. Verbal plus nonverbal, not in person. Verbal plus nonverbal in person, like a meeting, and in person plus written, where you have a follow-up memo. You can also use the written only if that works well with that recipient. But we start getting into low controllability along with a medium severity, and that's where we want to stay away from the first two types, the written only and the verbal not in person. This is like an employee being told that they are going to have less work hours than they've had in the past. So that would not be appropriate to just write that in a message to them. High severity, high controllability, forget about the first three. We only want to be verbal or nonverbal in person, like a meeting, or in person, and then do a written follow-up. And then lastly, the highest severity of the bad news and the lowest controllability, you want to make sure you're doing the last type there, the in-person meeting, written follow-up to go along with it. Okay, we have bad news messages that are both indirect and direct. The only difference in the components is the order in which you provide the second and third steps there. With an indirect bad news message, you kind of ease on into the bad news by providing the rationale first and then deliver the bad news. With the direct bad news message, you want to get that news out there, deliver that first, and then follow up with the rationale. So it's just the order of when you deliver the actual news and when you provide the rationale that goes along. Okay, so you're going to want to sympathize with your recipient. You want to soften the blow as much as possible. People probably have already made judgments about your concern based on your past treatment and your nonverbal behavior. It is suggested in both cases, direct and indirect, that you start off your bad news message with a 1 or 2 sentence buffer. which kind of softens the blow. A buffer is a statement that establishes common ground, shows appreciation, states your sympathy, or otherwise expresses goodwill. So we've got some examples of some buffers here for bad news messages. Remember, this is where you start, okay? Either a neutral statement, or you can actually state appreciation. Thank you for submitting your competitive bid to supply and deliver plastic resins for the upcoming year. Okay, that's appreciation. Or you can use sympathy. We're sorry to hear about the crack in your countertop. That's a product that you has failed to perform in your customer's eyes. Common ground. Reducing work hours creates unwanted financial challenges for our employees. Or compliment. Thank you for your excellent work, especially during a temporary period of cash flow changes. Okay, so you're trying to be kind of easing things in here before the actual delivery of the news itself. Often you can send out a teaser message. A teaser message is a signal that there may be some unpleasant news coming. Okay, kind of a preparation emotionally, but it does not give any specific information. It's often in a written format. You want your tone to express genuine concern in a professional manner. Give some positive direction, but don't provide any kind of false hope. Use a style that is simple, accurate, jargon-free, and keep it simple throughout the whole thing. All right, so how do we have a less effective delivery of bad news to a client? This is a written response to a client that has had a long-term relationship with this company, and it seems to be pretty impersonal. It's got some complex language in there. Effective 60 days from now, the outstanding credit line for Marble Home Makeovers will be reduced to $30,000. Your current outstanding balance of $94,345 far exceeds this new limit. We will move to collect if you're unable to meet these new requirements. Okay, they just like bam. Okay, no buffer at all there. We found out that the bank is going to actually reduce his credit line, a tremendous amount there. Doesn't really give any solution. It would have been more effective if possibly this person person who wrote the message, Cindy Cooper, actually had a more face-to-face meeting with this client, at the very least call him and talk verbally rather than just blowing this news at him all at once in the form of a letter. Bad news announcements sometimes get what's called the mum effect playing on them. This is when you have a chain of messages within an organization and it gets filtered at every level that actually leaves out or inaccurately states the bad news, so that by the time it gets to top executives, what they're hearing is not at all the truly severe message. It's become painted rather unrealistic, and it seems like it's kind of covered up as to what's actually going to happen. So not a good thing that happens there. All right, but we know that in all management positions, there are going to be times when you have to give bad news to either your boss or the people you're working with or the people that work for you. You want to be able to do this to maintain a transparent and open work culture. This example here is, again, a bad example of a bad news message to employees. The subject line, reduction in work hours for factory workers. I mean, there's no buffer. The recipient reads that subject line and immediately there's bad news hitting them in the face there. As you read through this, you'll see that the employer seems to not really be showing concern for the employees, but more for themselves. It's only negative views given out. There's no expression of goodwill, no address of the immediate impacts of what's going to happen and the concerns that our employees would actually have. The more effective delivery here, in this example, is a much better way to approach this bad news. Notice that the subject line is not quite as harsh there. It's more of a buffer, temporary change in work shifts over the next 3 months. There is a concern expressed in the very beginning. There is rationale provided for what's going on. There are immediate impacts, like no overtime shifts, 2 fewer 4-hour shifts per employee per week. So those are spelled out. And there's a focus on the future and a statement of goodwill at the end. So this message is, while it still conveys the same information, it does it in a much more concerning type way, with the idea that the employees are of major importance to this company. All right, another type of bad news message would be when you have been approached by one of your colleagues with a request or an idea and you need to turn them down. You don't want to make your working relationship in the future uncomfortable. Sometimes, however, we tend to offer up something known as token appreciation. And that is really a mistake. A token appreciation is an expression of thanks, of gratitude for a request or idea, but you are also at the same time dismissing that idea as implausible or even inappropriate. Okay, so you're sort of talking out of both sides of your mouth. You're saying thank you, but then you're just totally dismissing things right away. That is not the correct thing to do. Bad news messages to your customers, same as our other type of components of bad news messages. With this kind of message, however, you want to make sure you're providing options available for your customer, where they have some control over what takes place in the future. Most customers, not your colleagues or your employees, but most customers are interested only in the solutions to the problems, not in the problem itself. All right, so this is a good example, an effective bad news message to a customer. This is the one with the countertop that was cracked, so your message overall has a positive tone to it. Repairing your countertop is the subject rather than, your broken countertop, something like that. We do have a buffer that expresses concerns, as we're sorry to hear about the crack in your countertop. There's rationale. It says, since the countertop was not purchased with a warranty, we are unable to provide a refund or fix it without charge. That's bad news. Clearly the customer wants their countertop repaired. The customer feels like this company is responsible for repairing it, but you're delivering bad news saying we You can't do that because your countertop was not under warranty. All right, there's a focus on the future, but there are options given. You see, there's two options there: repair the crack yourself or schedule a visit. It's going to cost $75. Again, there's concern expressed for the customer, but it's given the customer an option as to what they want to do. All right, how about when you have to give negative feedback? This has to do with sometimes an individual's performance, okay? And you're giving information to someone about their performance on the job. They are suggesting that you adopt a team-centered orientation and avoid sugarcoating the bad news. Explain how that person's poor performance impacts the organization. Link it to the consequences of their performance. Try to determine what the reasons for poor performance are. And look at problem solving rather than blaming. Be firm. So one of the hardest things you will probably do as a supervisor will be to actually give negative feedback. It's very easy to pat people on the back and say, job well done, but what happens when you have to tell someone that they did not do a very good job and that they need to make improvements? Okay, so our table 11.4 shows some less effective and more effective ways to give feedback. The first one is a less effective one, and it's using what they call the sandwich approach, which is putting the bad news in the middle of some good things, in the middle of a compliment and a nicety. Jake, as usual, I'd like to thank you for how supportive you are of employees. Really boosts morale. That's the good stuff. That's the compliment. One thing I want to raise for the review is that on several shipments, our customers have complained. Items with defects. So there's the bad news in there. And then it's ended up with, well, again, thank you for your efforts. See you later on for lunch. Now, that's kind of just sandwiching the bad news in between good, and it makes it very hard for the receiver to actually hear that news. Okay? So look at the more effective approach. It's more targeted and straightforward. Jake, for today's performance review, I want to focus on one issue, making sure all your shipments contain the correct items and that they're all defect-free. So it's right to the point, but it doesn't really point the finger. It just says, this is what we're going to try to do to improve things. Again, focus on the actions and the results, not anyone's attitudes or intentions. And I'll let you read that one because it's just another example there that shows the less effective with the more effective. Important to give a negative performance review that has measurable components to it. If you can't measure the results, or if the goals were not realistic to begin with, employees may feel that they really don't know what to do to make things better. Okay? So, less effective here. Jake, we need to really focus on getting everything right from now on. I know you and your crew will do great and turn around things for next performance review. It's very vague. It doesn't tell Jake what he needs to do to improve things. But by making it measurable or realistic, that second statement is a little better there. Jake, at our next quarterly performance review, we'll discuss how well you've done with your shipments. The standard will be to receive no complaints from customers for incorrect orders or defective products. So you can see that is clear. This is what you got to do, Jake, in order to improve things. Okay. Now take yourself out of the shoes of the giver of the bad information, bad news, and now you're going to be the receiver. Okay? Somewhere along your life, you know, it's not going to be all hunky-dory, happy days. You're probably going to get some feedback about your performance and your potential that might be negative. Try to look at this feedback, even when it's negative, as a way to develop your skills. A way for you to improve your contributions to the workplace and possibly move into different positions. Okay, you might feel anger, anxiety, you might be defensive, you may feel like you just want to refuse to do, or you're going to get some kind of punishment almost, a reprisal, or a personal rejection. Try to not act out your anger. Try not to avoid your anxiety or avoid the actual confrontation. Denial is not going to get you anywhere. Withdrawing is not going to get you from anywhere. Try to think of this as an opportunity to get guidance and feedback. I know one of the things that we really had to teach ourselves when I was in my doctoral program and writing my dissertation, which was being reviewed by a team full of people, is that they all gave feedback, and some of it was not so nice. You had to teach yourself to believe that the feedback that you got was in order to advance you, not to pull you back. It was not a personal attack on you. It was a way to develop your writing so that it was better, more effective. Now, when you get to the end with your bad news messages, if you're writing them, always reread them several times, okay? Put yourself in the shoes of the recipient so you can kind of imagine how they're going to feel and react. You may even ask someone that you work with to look at your message and give you some feedback before you actually send the message out. They may be more objective and can see the other person's position a little bit better. As always, as we are looking at our messages, we want to use this FAIR approach before we send them. FAIR takes a look at the facts, the access, the impacts, and the respect. We've seen this in several of our types of messages before, addressing if your communication is actually factual, how transparent you are, providing your rationale, and how that will actually impact the people who are looking at this. And finally, how respectful is your communication. So we do know that delivering bad news impacts your credibility. We've got different channels we can choose. We've got some guidelines now. We can look at indirect and direct bad news messages, which are not totally different, but just in the order of when the bad news is actually presented. We have the delivery of negative performance reviews, and then how we should take a look at our bad news messages before we actually send them out. Okay. So think back to that original video where think back to that original video where that fellow was being told in the lunchroom about the possibility that he was going to lose his job, or he was going to reapply for his job or whatever. There were so many things done wrong in that situation, starting out with the delivery channel there should not have been in the break room with other employees around. But you could see that the deliverer of the message, she tried to sugarcoat things at first. She didn't have the answers to all the impacts. In fact, it looked like she didn't have answers for just about anything. And you saw both the deliverer and the recipient allowing emotions to take over in the situation as well. So hopefully we can avoid doing those types of bad news message deliveries. Okay, let me get the screen right here. Got this guy still up here. Okay. We lost everything here. Okay, so hopefully we've got all of us up here again. And we are, first of all, ask if you have any questions about anything as far as the PowerPoints or the video or anything of that sort. Okay, well, if not, let's take our little 15-minute break and we'll come back, and I have another video for us to take a look at, and that kind of summarizes everything for us, and then we'll talk about the tests and the assignments that are coming up. So let's see, I have 2:52, so about 10 after will be fine, 10 after 3. Alrighty, folks, let's finish things up here, and we're going to take a look at this video, which is a nice little summary for us, and then we'll talk about the rest of the week.
Hey, thanks for joining me. In this short video, I'm just going to review some of the helpful guidelines for developing messages when conveying bad news. We know that unfortunately in business, there comes a time when we do have to relay a piece of negative communication. So in order for us to maintain positive relationships with our coworkers and with our colleagues and peers, it's important that we can phrase it in such a way that doesn't necessarily change the underlying idea that we're declining or something of that nature, but the manner in which we do it can foster the relationship and allow it to continue, as opposed to being just blatantly rude or mean. And so we're going to focus on how to do that. What I have here are a couple of examples of ways that you could structure such a message. One obviously is better than the other, and I'm sure as you're reading through that you can figure out which one is. And so the top one here, we can just go ahead and read through this briefly. This is a letter that was sent obviously to a particular individual related to a question about installing GPS, of course. So what it says is we cannot or can't afford to install an in-dash GPS system in our current fleet of company vehicles. I would really like to afford the luxury of having GPS navigate your trips. Unfortunately, the cost of installing GPS in our current trucks is excessive at over $500 per truck. And then there is monthly service fee. Management would never agree to spend that much money at this time. I'll do what I can to convince management to include GPS in the specifications of future company vehicles. So the couple of things to key in on, you may argue that, you know what, this doesn't sound necessarily bad to me. Maybe there are certain things I would change, but as a whole, I might send this type of message. And there are a couple of things that should stand out to you as far as things that maybe you want to tweak. The first thing is this subject line right here. You look at it already says GPS out of the question. And so already you've given the reader no further incentive to actually look at what you've included because they know that you've already declined their request. So really, why would I waste my time? Why would I read further? And as a writer, if you're declining somebody, you generally do not want to give away what it is that you're trying to communicate right off the bat. Now, you might argue, hey, it's more clear, it's more direct, people will appreciate that. And that's true. However, if you're trying to convince somebody or make them understand why it is that you went through a certain course of action, you generally want to start with an inductive approach, meaning that you explain yourself first, you provide the different facts, your analyses, your reason for refusing their request. And then, after they've had a chance to see your reasoning, maybe it will make the no a little easier to understand because they may not agree with it at the end of the day. They may think they still want this and it should be approved, but at least they understand why you chose that certain course of action. So that does what we call build goodwill. Because although we may not always agree on the decisions that we make, we at least understand the thought process that was considered and can understand the rationale. So I would never recommend starting with a subject line that is already declines the request or already hints that the request is going to be declined, because it gives the reader no further incentive to actually open the email or read the document further. It's a complete waste of time. Notice in the first sentence already, they say we can't afford to install an in-dash global positioning system in our current fleet of vehicles. And once again, starting with the main idea first, if you're using an inductive approach, if you're trying to send or communicate bad news, you want to start with that information towards the end. You want to start by communicating what it is that your reasoning is to help them understand you. Notice further, it almost comes off a little condescending here too. I would really like to afford you the luxury of having a GPS navigate your trips. Now, it comes off a little condescending, a little combative in nature, basically saying, you know, this is a luxury, so suck it up. You really don't need this, right? Go ahead and print out a map before you leave, and then you're completely fine. So you don't want to take a combative approach, but once again, if I'm reading this, maybe someone might glance over, but if I read this, I'm thinking, you know what, that's not very nice. And once again, I'm just not necessarily going to transition further into the body of this particular message here. So maybe a more effective approach is this second email, which is the same content, it's just worded a different way. And I'll read this through briefly and then we can discuss it. And it starts with the subject line, installation of GPS suggestion. So you notice that it's very neutral. It doesn't need you to believe that you're refusing the statement or that there's bad news coming. You just know that they're responding to your installation request for GPS. So first, your suggestion to install an in-dash global positioning system in our current fleet of vehicles was good. Do you notice how it starts very positive, right? You're reinforcing the reader, thanking them for writing a suggestion, which is great because as an employer, the best suggestions come from the people they directly impact. It isn't your executives thinking of these great ideas in their ivory towers. It is the people that are doing the work that identify there is an opportunity and identify a shortcoming with the current process, and they say, hey, we should do this. So you don't want to discourage them from suggesting further things because that's where you lack innovation and then you get stale as a company and it's very difficult to continue to develop and be innovative. If your employees are very fearful of giving suggestions because you completely turn them down and make them feel that. So moving forward, having GPS systems in our vehicles would be a convenient addition. Once again, you read that sentence and there is nothing to indicate that the person is leaning towards one way or the other. I know that we're agreeing at this point, right? That's what you want to get the reader to do, is agree with you. Yes, I agree that my suggestion was good. That's not very far reach. Yes, I agree that it would be convenient. That's why I suggested it. So you get them agreeing with your rationale. Notice this next paragraph. After checking the price of installing these in our current trucks, I found that it would cost $500 per truck plus a monthly service fee. Once again, nothing as far as opinion goes. This is all fact. I can't dispute this. It does cost $500 per truck. There is a monthly fee. We are still in agreement here. With the current budget situation, these costs would be prohibitive during the current recession. Okay? Unless I've been living under a rock the last few years, I'm well aware that there's a recession going on. I understand how those can imply or can create some budgetary constraints. Obviously, revenues are probably not as high as they could have been. Consumer spending is historically lower. So these are things that I agree with. This is a very rational argument. I'm a reasonable person. I can understand this. Since the idea is an excellent one, we can propose to management that future company vehicles include GPS. This should be less expensive and costs can be budgeted. Thank you for the excellent idea, and I will pass on to management. So we don't necessarily stop the idea at this point, right? We filter it, we continue to put it up to management, right? Because it is a good idea. And we want to encourage the employee to continue to think of good ideas because those are going to benefit us as a company. But notice what they did very interestingly in paragraph 3, right? They transitioned the argument almost. They developed what we call a counter proposal, which you always want to do. You never want to end with a bad note. Hey, I know it sucks, but sorry, we're not going to approve this, so get over it, blah, blah, blah. And you expect the employee to go on their merry way, being productive and all those different things. Meanwhile, they're going to be, that's going to sit, it's going to resonate with, and it's not going to sit very positive. But instead, they have a counter proposal. It's like, hey, this is a great idea. We would normally love this. Cost is obviously an issue. So this is what we think we can do. Why don't we budget for future vehicles? You think, you know, you guys didn't get exactly what I wanted, but it's still, there is some change. The idea is good. They reinforce that. And ultimately, there are going to be some changes going forward with new company vehicles being equipped with GPS. And then once again, a rational argument. This should be less expensive and costs we can budget for. Completely.
Oh dear. It always happens what?
When you talk about it, when you hear talk about it, because last time he was talking about it,
Oh gosh. All right, if y'all can hear me, I'm going to turn it back on as soon as I can get it to stop blinking off. I don't know why it does that. It's like it's a timer on it or something. And I can't turn it back on until it stops blinking off. It has to cycle off before I can turn it back on. You guys still there with me?
Yes.
Maybe it is. Can you wave at me or something if you can hear me? Hello?
Where?
And the reasoning and the argument here. Now,
You guys still there?
Yes.
All right, we're sorry. Our projector just cut off. So let's finish this up real quick and and talk about the test before we
One
end
of
up
the things
with
you
other
also want to do is in the close.
problems here.
Is you do want to shift the focus away from the bad news. You told them no, there's no reason to pour salt in the wound, there's no reason to rub it in. And you want to transition away from that negative news. And they obviously do that by going through the counter proposal and then explaining how this is an excellent idea, it's going to be passed on to management, thanking the individual for their time in developing it. And that's what you can do to help continue and foster the relationship. As I said, our goal here is to make sure that the lines of communication are open, our employees understand our reasoning behind it, right? They understand the why, and ultimately that makes that decision to tell them a little more understanding. So try to, if you're ever in a position in which you're communicating potentially negative information, first you want to assess, well, is a letter, the best way to do it? Maybe it's a face-to-face conversation. But if you decide that ultimately a email or a memo of some kind is the best way to do it, make sure that you structure it in a way that encourages the reader to go through and actually see your reasoning, but also reinforces the behavior that you want. And that is that you want them making recommendations, you want them doing things of that nature. You don't want to discourage them. And so follow that format, and that will ultimately increase the effectiveness of your written communication.
Okay, I'm hoping that everybody got that fairly well, even though we had a little interruption there, but looks like we were back towards the end. Okay, so I'm looking at Blackboard right now, and I'm hoping you all can see there's your normal multiple choice homework for Chapter 11 that's due Sunday. The test resides right there. However, don't click on it until Thursday for our class time, because you can't get, it's got a password on it anyway, you can't get past that. So we'll do that Thursday during our regular class time, and that's all we will do. There is your last part of your message portfolios. The 3, 1, 2, and 3 will be, grades will be averaged together for 25% of your grade. So this is your last in this group right here. I didn't copy the whole assignment here. I just referenced you to the application exercise 1110 that is in your textbook, which is on page 363. 363, 1110. It's the elimination of a tuition reimbursement program. It refers back to the page before that where it says the case for the problem, bad news at Jensen Chemicals and Hardware Depot. So there's a whole background right there given you in that other page. Now you're not addressing everything that's in that background. You are you're just doing one little tiny piece of it there on 1110, but you get the background there on the page before. Okay, so your test, of course, it will be done in Connect, so you will need access to a computer. If you're on Daniel, you can go to the Comprehensive Learning Center. If you're in Emporia, they will take care of your testing there. I've sent both of those places. Really should have the information. They don't really need to proctor you, but I do need you to do that during the regular class time. So if you will just go there, it's just the classrooms don't have computers. Okay? And
Ms. Henderson,
yes.
what if you're going to be out of town on Thursday?
She's saying this Thursday's on flight. Yeah.
So you weren't planning on coming to class at all?
No, I'll be out of town with my family.
I don't know. Shoot me an email and we'll work out something.
Okay.
Can we do the test at home?
During the class time?
I suppose, but you'll have to email me at the beginning of the class and I'll give you the password
Okay.
at that point. So that's possible.
Okay.
Okay? All right. Okie. It's just like the last test was. This is chapters 5 through 11. So it's covering, quite a few chapters. I would look for the big points, the high points in each one of them. Maybe go back over those homeworks that you've submitted and see if there was anything that stood out that you were not clear about. But don't just, wait until Thursday and show up and try to take the test, because you really do need to get your notes organized and things like that. And again, you can use your book, you can use your notes, but you cannot go outside of the website to any other website. Questions about that?
You said it's gonna be a password. Will the people in the labs have the password for the test?
Yes, they will. Sure will. Okay, I sent that out to them this morning, so they should be ready to roll. Okay. Any questions about anything? All right, don't forget, I think I made this bad news message assignment due the 15th, I believe. Yes, Sunday, July 15th. But you still have the one that was from last week that's due this Sunday. Okay. All right. Well, if that's the case, no questions, I'm going to go start celebrating my birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Have a good one.